Now that's a tough act to follow. Congratulations, Brian. I do have the details on the sessions that Brian Mulligan will be having for the rest of the week. So he's going to be in the 11 seminar room, and today from 11 to 12:30 will be a session on knee and ankle treatment. And then also today from 4 to 5:30 will be the session on headaches, shoulders, and tennis elbow. And then tomorrow, on Friday, same room, 11 seminar room, and he will be, from 9 to 10:30, he'll be looking at chronic back, sacroiliac, and hip. Okay, so those are the details on those added sessions. So he'll be playing here for the rest of the week. Okay, thank you, Brian. We're going to move on to the next speaker. Lorimer Moseley is a clinical research physiotherapist and NHMRC Principal Research Fellow. He has a PhD in medicine from the University of Sydney and was a Neufeld Fellow at Oxford University and is now Professor in Clinical Neurosciences and Foundation Chair in Physiotherapy at the University of South Australia and Neuroscience Research Australia. So the title of his talk this morning is Expanding Our Management Approach for Patients in Pain. Please welcome Lorimer.
So I now will know what it feels like. There's a famous story of the Everly Brothers having a concert and coming on after their support act, who was Jimi Hendrix. And it doesn't feel very good. So I can't see Brian, but I had so many thoughts while he was speaking. A fellow of really unexampled enthusiasm and commitment to his people. And by that I mean not just manual therapists, but I think to his species. It's just inspiring to hear more of his story. I did also notice that both he and I were receiving very impressive national awards in the 1970s. Mine was for the 9-year-old boys' 70 metres running race. And his was for basically the Kiwi of the Year. I mean, absolutely astounding. A privilege to be part of that little half an hour. I'm really pleased that he didn't ask if anyone has hemorrhoids, because that would have been hard to fix. But anyway, so I'm going to try and somehow maintain the energy. This is going to be a real challenge, and I'll start off with my disclosures because they're really exciting. And most relevant, I guess, for this talk, again, royalties that I receive for books, and I receive speaker fees and course fees if you attend a course that I do. So here are some things that I hear patients say, and I have spent much of my clinical existence really intrigued by the patients that I see. Sometimes really overwhelmed, and I definitely share that really authentic excitement and privilege of being a part of a journey that someone might have from being in trouble to really living again. And I really resonated with that at the end as Brian said that is just an amazing feeling, isn't it, to be a part of that journey. I've also had a lot of my clinical experience thinking, what the is going on here? The stuff that I hear patients say, obviously we all hear this, it's difficult to move it, but here I think of those patients who are looking at their limb and saying, it's hard for me to get it to move. It's hard for me actually to make it do what I want it to do. My limb changes colour and goes cold, and you'll recognise this from classic conditions like complex regional pain syndrome. But also conditions that don't satisfy those criteria. Still, people look at their limb and it's changing in front of them. The pain has spread up and across my back, and when I first started to hear this as a physiotherapy student, I remember the first patient I ever saw as a student, and I'd been through a couple of years of undergraduate training where you get to practice your techniques on very beautiful, buff bodies, and you would really get excited about musculoskeletal tutorials, and you'd start to maneuver to the right area of the room for your little session of soft porn. And I always used to line up Katie Weir because she was absolutely beautiful and had very palpable vertebra. And then I got into a public hospital, and the first patient I saw, and I remember thinking, you just lie down there on your stomach, great. And it was the first person I'd seen who has no vertebra. And I remember thinking, that's a bit weird. So, you know, I did massage, and that was cool. But I remember hearing this sort of comment that what started as quite a discrete, localized pain had spread up and across their back. And what that made me think of is a why. Why does that happen? Why does it spread in that direction, if you like? And why does it cover that area? There's no nerves that cover that area. Why does that happen? The pain moves around. Raise your hand if you've had a patient, they come in for left-sided low back and leg pain, and you treat it, and they come back the next week and they say, it's fantastic, it's on the right side now. Why does that happen? Mechanistically, I think, wow, how does that occur? Feels like it doesn't belong to me anymore. Patients start to use terms like, it's got a mind of its own, or she's playing up today. I remember one person whose name was Doris, and I said, how are you, Doris? She said, I'm great, thanks. Martha's giving me the shits. I said, who's Martha? My knee. I call her Martha. She reminds me of a nun I had when I was at school, same sort of temperament. And I found myself thinking about what Doris was saying there and thinking, wow, how is that mediated to actually begin to think that this is not you, this is a separate entity with a life of its own and a personality of its own. I often get people asking me, telling me I really like your shirt. Sometimes I feel odd sensations in the limb, or sometimes I feel like my back's swollen when I know that it's not, those sort of statements. Sometimes I don't know where it is, where this limb is, or I don't know where I am, or I'm starting to run into doors. I'm starting to go and shake people's hands, and I just always get that finger grip. You know that grip when you shake someone's hand and you don't coordinate your grip very well and they grab your fingers? And you're sitting there in the shake thinking, this is just so unimpressive. And they've got my fingers and they're probably reminding them of a wet fish, and I hate that. And if I've ever shaken someone's hand like that, you'll know that I redo the shake. This is advice to everyone. If you get in a finger shake, redo the shake. Because if you don't, you will forever be remembered by them as a wet fish. So how can we explain these things? And I had a fantastic dinner last night at a beautiful restaurant called Mother India. Has anyone been there while you're here? It's just an astounding restaurant, which meant that I missed out on what apparently was the gig of the century. I'd like to congratulate Roger and Alan for apparently really blowing away the crowd. Either it was you guys or it was the alcohol that apparently was in full flow. But I found myself reflecting on why I do what I do. And I think it's because of this. I really want to explain things. I really want to explore. I'm an explorer. And I really don't want to let those comments of it's got a mind of its own just go through to the keeper, which is a very sort of Commonwealth phrase, but that idea of letting them go through without thinking about them. So I find myself thinking about these things. How to explain it? And for me, I'm immediately attracted towards the brain. This is just a natural predisposition I have to think, well, that's where I'd like to look for that. So in 1 cubic centimetre of the brain, you have about 1 billion synapses. In 1 cubic centimetre, it's about the same size as maybe the end of your index finger or your thumb. There are 1 billion synapses. I reckon that's cool. And that's only the half of it. There are 1 trillion neuroglial synapses in that. Think of that number. Think of the options for connection, and I love that complexity. And this is something that I brought up on Monday, this idea of a cortical body matrix, and to take that a step further, is really a conceptual model trying to make sense of all the networks we have running from the brainstem to the thalamus to the cortex. We could call them brainstemothalamo-cortical loops, and how they behave in response to stimuli that are occurring in our personal space or in our body, and I touched on some of that stuff. But how do we make sense of this in a conceptual paradigm that we can integrate into clinical practice? And to do that, I've drawn very heavily on the researchers who are working with computer-brain interfaces in monkeys, the people who are growing neurons in petri dishes or the equivalent and watching how they connect and how they modulate and what dendrites get lost and what synapses get pruned or fostered. And on the back of all that research, and there's a lot of research on that, a lot of people with PhDs, that was a really interesting observation from Brian as well, that there are more physios with PhDs than there are doctors in Australia. Doctors with PhDs in Australia. And some of the response to that, I think, was leading into this idea of a potential crisis in manual therapy. My perspective on that is that and this is I think it's an old Chinese proverb, that I think the word for crisis is the same as the word for opportunity, and I get really excited about the opportunity that arises when we have people dedicated to understanding and pursuing that. The challenge is that we all stay together on the same page and on the same boat, that we don't jump ship from each other, and I think that's really important. So if we were to conceptualise the brain as a mass of neurotags, it might look something like that. And the idea of a neurotag is just a different word for a network of neurons. And really we need to say a network of brain cells, because that network has glial cells, more glial cells than it has neurons. And it's this neuroimmune interaction that we can say, well, there's a network that over time have all developed pathways that work together. And when they are active together, they produce some sort of output. They actually produce something. And that production is the thing that still is a mystery to neuroscientists. But if we were to look slightly more closely at this bunch of neurotags and start unraveling them like you might a cadaver, if we could do that in the brain, we keep going back until we get these networks that look like this. For example, this might be, for example, a pain neurotag. And what I mean by that is a network of brain cells, neural and immune, that when they work together, the person experiences pain. So another way of conceptualizing that is this. Can you stand up if you were born in July, please? Stand up. Okay, what's the date today?
That's a really good question.
Between us, we should be able to work this out.
Today's the 7th, right?
7th? Really? 7th of July? Is it? Okay, can you raise your hand if you were born on the 7th of July? Happy birthday! Congratulations. What a way to spend your day. That's fantastic. And what's really appropriate about this is that you are a thalamus cell. You are a critical relay station in almost everything that happens to the body. And just have a look at your fellow cells in this neurotag that we might say is the pain neurotag. And let's say we've got the human lying down on their side like this, and their front's here. And if you want to have some quick neuroanatomy, this part of the brain here is called the front. This is called the back, and that's the top up there. And you're the thalamus, and you get messages from the spinal cord that might say, for example, there's danger in your back. If you turn around and look at your neurotag, and it's not until all of those other people stand up that the individual experiences pain. And let's say you have to be prepared to respond to this. Can you sit down again? Here's a real life example from our world. Let's say you reach down into the back of your car, picking up your pet kangaroo, and it gives a kick, and you tear or you tweak a bit of the annulus on the outside of the laft, the living adaptable force transducer that used to be called the intervertebral disk. Because it's got nothing to do with a disc, right? It's completely